It was the third morning after that first blizzard that we met Miska and Ogman. We had forced our way out of the house and had just managed to clear the porch of snow when we saw the lights of their wagon far on the early morning horizon. By the time we had cleared some modest paths, their wagon had reached the edge of our plot, demarcated as it was by simple metal poles, barely sticking above the snows. We could now see how they made such good time in this snow as high as it was. The front of their wagon had a heat emitter of some sort, melting and evaporating the snow in their path. That is also when it became clear that they were Celestians. Their steeds were made of a smooth gray metal, crystal eyes glowing softly as their heads shifted slowly about. The one holding the reins called out to us as we approached. "Greetings. By chance, if we were to offer our services in clearing this snow, could we stay a few days to tend and mend our own? This storm was far more stressful than we anticipated. We are happy to offer a full cord of fuel logs to cover the strain, if that would help." The brothers' eyes went wide, for a single fuel log was equivalent to an entire day worth of energy from a small bonfire. An entire cord would keep us in power for months, if not years, spent wisely. But there was an issue. Mother and father wouldn't hear of it. I began striding to the wagon still. "You help clear the snow, and you are free to stay as long as you want, as long as you help do what needs done. We have the room, and we have enough wood." I could hear Lanson choke back an argument as Justique landed behind him, cuffing him solidly. "Boy's right. You're welcome this day. However, Kath, here's a log for today. It would speed things up quite a bit without having to keep running back to keep the fire going. We have a lot of land to clear. This is a reasonable middle ground. Yes?" Justique had become a master of compromise, having just been stuck the last 3 weeks with his brother and I in the house. And it was a lapse in host manners not to accept at least a token of appreciation from a guest, and mother and father had always been such sticklers for those duties and manners between hosts and their guests. The man, who I thought was initially in a damaged state, as he was only a torso, lifted off the bench of the wagon, floating on little jets of energy as he came down to me, with a single fuel log wrapped in a thick paper. "Reasonable indeed, sir, if the young master agrees." He extended a metal limb, a round cord of sectioned rings, with 3 smaller extensions of cord with rings binding him tight, holding the log out to me as he descended. I took the log. As he set it into my hands, he retracted his limb with an audible whir. The sound reminded me of a toy spring winding up. It made me grin. "Of course. Please, let's get your wagon to the barn. I'll get this into the fireplace and we can get started. How many of there are you? Just the 2 of you and your steeds?" I had heard of Celestians, of course, and even seen them at work on one of the ships we'd booked passage on, but I had never spoken to one, and realized how little I actually knew about them. "My node mate, Miska, and our 8 embers, Mist 1 through 4, and Og 1 through 4. As if summoned, 4 sets of Celestians hopped out of the wagon, looking about mechanically before they started to begin clearing the snow. Presumably Miska, with a full humanoid form, began to tut and direct these embers about their work. "I am Ogmen, by the way. And you, fine masters, whom do we thank for the shelter?" "I am Lanson. This is my brother Justique." His brusque tone made it clear he was not happy with this situation, and that made him snappy. However, his next words nearly made me trip as I was heading into the house to load the fuel log into the fireplace. "And the master of this home is Katheon. He has a little brother and charge. Whatever threat he was about to level, Justique killed with his typical smooth style. Well, Augment, my friend, Lawson must like you. He only starts in like that on those he has a good feeling about. The smooth warmth in his tone was undercut only slightly by the look he was giving Lassen, before Lassen smiled and raised his hands in surrender, which was met by with laughter by our guests. We then spent the bulk of the day clearing snow and making sure everything was in order. The barn had gone mostly unused, as the animals it was intended for never got to use it, except for Phallus, and he spent more time in the house with me than the barn. Quite the spoiled little Pragon. The workshop, however, was in better order, and both Miska and Augment showed great interest in the equipment and inquired if they could use it in their own mendings. These are quality systems, Master. Augment, enough with the whole master thing. Katheon, if you must be formal. Of course, sir. However, these systems are of impeccable quality. Are you trained in their use and function? Mother and father both made sure I was at least aware of the basics. I'm not too bad with the forge. Father never shooed me out at least, chuckling as I lifted a book from a shelf near the drafting board. You're free to use the forge and all its gear. But this book, I tapped the cover. It contains a number of advanced designs Father intended to make once we got here. I'd like you to review them and give me a breakdown of which ones you think are of immediate need, and which ones you think could be put off. Any designs you can't work out, bring them to me. There's sure to be at least some erratic designs included. He took the book with a smile on his digital little face. Of course, sir. I can have that for you by the time you and your brothers have finished dinner. Augment tilted his head to the door a moment before 4 of the embers had walked in. By their colors and marks, Aug 1 through 4. They were holding a handful of short metal tip stakes and a large ringed disc made of metal and wood. Primary Augment. Objects of unknown designation. Seeking protocol clarification. What to do with objects. Where did you find our Jadart set? That should have been on the side of the barn, but that is... I looked out the window to see they must have just finished it. Pristine and cleared. Damn, they were fast. That would have taken us a week to get all that cleared out. Never mind. Jadarts. I am unfamiliar with this activity. Augment's curiosity was infectious. Oh, it's nothing special. Just the game of darts with, oversized darts or technically undersized javelins. I slowly replied as to the extent of their efforts, and how much we had done in only a day was dawning on me in full. Darts. The linguistic effect is understood. Thank you, sir. Augment's smile seemed to be a bit wider after the exchange. The game's board seems damaged. Would you like it mended? I nodded assent, and the embers set the darts and board near the forge. I will tend to it tonight. For now, those designs. You should go get food. I detect that the meal is nearing completion. I will attend you with my review shortly. If you pass Miska, could you direct her in this way? I affirmed I would, as I turned my attention to the smell of roast, my hunger asserting itself quite loudly now that I had realized how much work we had actually done. Just as I was returning from clearing the table after our hearty meal and cleaning the dishes, I entered to Miska and Augment speaking with the brothers. The table I had just cleared was now covered with Father's designs. It brought a smile to my face. It would appear that there are numerous designs that were intended for immediate production, with all materials in stock for their creation. They include a number of items that were clearly intended for you and Sir Katheon. Hogman looked in my direction. As you suspected, sir, many include robotic components. However, those components are, for the most part, already fabricated and in stock. As they were for the most part smaller items, emitters or converters, I would speculate they were built during your trip here. Father was always busy with something, so that doesn't overly shock me. Justic had an edge to his voice. Something about this was not to his liking. You're familiar with robotic designs and their construction? Miska intoned a response in her soft, crystalline voice. Hogman is not. However, I am. I was installed with a basic understanding of the principles involved and further educated by several flame wielders on our passage from Patonia a few decades ago. Katheon, your father's designs are wonderfully efficient and compact. The three of you will be far better off once you are able to use your Lassen crashed into the floor over-tipped in his chair, shaking the room and disrupting everything. That had never happened before. His balance is too good for that. The oddity of it all struck me, until the pieces fell into place like an avalanche, and the resulting conclusion made my blood boil. I turned on my heel and moved with the smooth grace that only overwhelming rage contained can provide. Kath! Lassen shouted as I climbed the stairs and swept into my room for but a moment, before exiting and descending back down the stairs, returning to the room and setting a pyramid-shaped device on the table. Opening the top and pulling out a family heirloom, a glass with the crest of our house, ringed with runes. Between it and its container, I was about to clear the air. I looked at Lassen, who was now seated back up properly. The room was deathly silent. I held out the glass. Kath, what in the name of? Drop of blood. Give it, or I'm taking it. Lassen made a mistake and gave me a dismissive look of disbelief. That's all it was took. I punched him, focusing my erratic strength, crippled as it was, into the strike. The sharp sound of his snout cracking told me that it was enough, and a drop of blood rolled from his nose, falling into the glass I held below it. That hurt. Lansing was growling through gritted teeth. Miska moved to his side in a flowing manner, tending to his freshly broken snout with a cascade of healing energies. I ignored him and set the glass on the device, then charged it with my aura. It hummed softly, and then the drop expanded, slowly at first, until the glass was about a third full, topping the runes around it, which began to glow in random patterns for but a few moments. Then, as I expected, the air above the glass lit with an azure flame, the blood evaporating, leaving only a set of runes glowing softly for a few moments before fading away. House of Fog. I said it with all the venom I could muster, as I grabbed the glass and turned to Justic, who had his hands raised in surrender and his head lowered. House of Thunder. And since Mother and Father took us in on the Isle. Justic's soft admission, full of pain, began to take the heat from my rage. We're sorry. They told us about your... And then, it was back with the Fuhrer. Freakishness, my abnormality, my... I was only stopped by a light running over me from Miska. What are you? Sir Katheon, I detect no abnormalities. Are you well? I have various healing madas of various potencies. What is your ailment? Her simple concern and confusion doused any anger I might have had still. No, yeah, I mean, I am well, I am what is known as a hollow. An erratic with no higher form, no house or order. In essence, I'm an erratic cripple. The brothers were silent, but things began to make sense. That's why they always joined me for my morning exercises, for they were doing the same as I, training our aura. I'd always thought it was just to keep me company. Miska seemed to take a long moment to process this. I am unfamiliar. It's exceedingly rare. I was the first in millennia. It's why we left, to avoid the shame of this condition. But you can still activate auratic items and power them. That makes many of these designs make far more sense. Hugman seemed far more absorbed in the technical insights of this whole affair than the near brawl that had almost occurred, and began resorting the designs. I recommend we work on the items in the order I now have them here. And with that, we began to discuss how we would be spending the next few weeks, bringing Father's plans to life. By the 9 and 4. Welcome to the library. In today's entry, we will cover a bit more in depth into one of the realm's least understood people, that of the artificial and robotic Celestians. As always, this is not an exhaustive detailing of these most complex beings, and there will likely be far more entries in the future. That said, let us begin with a bit of background about these ancient creations of the elder race known as the NLR. As stated, they were originally created by the NLR to be soulless, automated workers, warriors, designed for the purpose of terraforming and colony construction. While the original model lines, which were highly effective, if limited in their scopes, were very, very widespread with large amounts of varieties and specializations made, for reasons unknown, more advanced models never seemed to appear. By the end of the Wars of Feather and Scale, however, there were no known remaining examples of any Celestian on Jamamar. However, just before the Age of Stars, the Hunters Council, which is a global partnership of professional adventurers, announced that the Celestians had been rediscovered. Where they had been discovered is still shrouded in rumor and hearsay, but it is known that of the small number that were introduced, records indicate that at least one, if not multiple models, had not been in record in any place until that time. Unlike the Celestians of histories, these beings had souls. Again, the methods to this achievement are similarly obscured, but it is not an automatic trait, it appears, as newly forged Celestians are without a soul. Being a semi-hive mind within their local group, or node, it appears they share their soul with others of the group to graft this most ephemeral of traits to those who lack it. From what has been shared, it requires a pair of fully souled Celestians of different models, as a minimum. These are then given a set of newly forged to raise over a period of time, so they are exposed to their primary souls. For some, it will initiate the slow formation of a soul of their own. This is not a guaranteed thing, however, as the soul is a fickle thing. Perhaps 1 or 2 in 10 will achieve this in any particular cycle. a cycle for Celestians lasting 1 or 2 centuries, typically. Those that do not tend to be returned to be assigned to a new node, while receiving replacements that have been through a similar amount of time. Each new cycle more awaken their capacity for soul bearing, but the process is slow, limiting their growth and their overall numbers. Celestians are classed under 4 basic model lines: warrior or laborer, engineer technical, meta or caster, and scout or courier. However, within these broad categories there is a vast amount of variety, as alluded to before. Body forms varying wildly depending on their point of origin. As stated earlier, they were in wide use in production across the early fleet, with each producer or designer diverging from their original design in their own ways and needs. However, a series of advanced or specialized models were discovered amongst the new soul-bearing Celestians. When the old fleet ships were reclaimed and recovered, their complements of Celestians were reactivated and given to the soul-bearing members of their kind. Among the advanced models that are now known were the Union and Omnos, Union being a command model for a cluster, which can scale from a single or less than a dozen nodes to as many as 3 times that, and an Omnos being a system-wide cluster command and coordination unit, directing and coordinating thousands of clusters at a time. Both are rare and seem to come fully bearing a soul, and appear to enhance the soul growth of those in their networks. Other more specialized forms of Celestians are that of animals or other beasts, which are used in many of the same ways as their biological components. Steeds may pull wagons, mechanical birds might search the land from on high, with many other possibilities existing. Larger examples include massive beasts, both flying and not, that can carry dozens of their smaller kin, as well as huge land movers or shapers that they employ in their geomantic works. It is, however, unclear if any of these animal forms are capable of gaining a soul. For the core model lines, once they've fully developed their souls, they are allowed to live in what most would recognize a free life, with self-determination and choice. Many, understandably, remain within greater Celestian society. However, a number will strike out to live on their own, often with at least one other. These bonded nodes will often go out with a number of embers, unsouled, but having shown signs of being close to catching the flame of a soul. The more souled primaries of differing model lines, the greater the chances of an ember soul ignition. However, after lighting this sacred flame, it must be nurtured and tended for years before it is fully established, and the Celestian is recognized as an independent soul. After ignition, an ember will remain with the primaries they were bonded to at the point of ignition, as this is considered their birth, and their primaries now their parents. Each general line has a similar function in general, and once fully bearing the soul's flame, tend to grow in similar veins. However, with any free-willed beings, there are always exceptions. The general soldier, warrior, or labor model should not be mistaken as unintelligent or a lesser being, despite its relatively sounding classification. They are fully capable of intelligently executing even a vague set of commands to a degree that belies their soulless status, so extensive are the various protocols and files of information they can draw upon. While everything they build will conform to those protocols, or any combat action will proceed along the vast array of preordained stratagems and counter-stratagems. That is, until the flame of the soul is alight, and then we see all that data become the framework to build on instead of limits to be held to. As with all Celestians, any inbuilt devices are similarly used as points from which the flame bearer can now grow, expanded, or innovative new talents from. It should be noted, however, that the general sensors of this class, the soldier or laborer, are the best overall of all Celestians. while others may have better in their own specialty. There are a few, except the advanced models, that can boast as robust an ability to detect and perceive at a baseline as the soldier model. The engineer or technical class, as is normal for Celestians, often specialize somewhere within this much broader class, while retaining base levels of aptitude in all possibly needed skill sets. With far better dedicated, directed sensors than most, they can diagnose issues and begin repairs quickly. Similarly, they can browse a massive library of designs to assemble solutions to unexpected conditions. Once again, once they feel the warmth of their own soul, creative adjustment and extrapolation becomes a common thing. Meta, or caster Celestians, are pre-built with a number of predefined magical or metaphysical abilities, often with a theme or generally intended role. However, they are just as often able to have a fair bit of room within those confines in control, focus, and adaptation, able to spread their abilities or focus them as is needed or reasonable. Once their souls are fully ignited, these abilities serve to shape the manner in which the Celestian will develop, often more than other models, a sign perhaps of the fundamental nature of metaphysical abilities upon the soul. Finally, the Scout or Courier model line was conceived as both a mobile investigation unit and a reliable, capable messenger, able to deliver a message and answer some questions intelligently. They were notably enough built with remote interfaces for pets, Celestian animal forms that would serve to aid the unit in its function, either as extra eyes in remote places or as point defense when talks went south. These animals grow ever more clever after their unit embodies a full soul. Of note, while they do not possess any need of it, it is noted that the Celestians often present as having males and females, with vocal tones, mannerisms, and other attributes common to one or the other. These appear to be for interactive purposes with other races, for whom this is normal, as they all possess these social biological categories, and it appears to have no bearing on their internal structures or interactions. There are many accounts of nodes or families, with all one gender or the other or any various combination thereof. Regardless of the families or nodes' makeup, it is understood that the best conditions for ignition have tended to be out in the wild of real life, hence the small number that are found scattered amongst the realms, aiding others to gain the experience to hopefully light the flame of soul in those that are now in their care, trading the labor and expertise of themselves and their node for the chance to live and put their practice the vast library of skills that they are typically built with. They are a great boon to any who find themselves in a partnership with such a wandering node. Each primary, or fully grown and souled member of a node, tends to receive one each of the base models, allowing the node to have a full range of abilities and thus able to adapt to whatever they may find themselves addressing. Additionally, they tend to be given a number of animal models to assist in their travels, or as otherwise appropriate. As noted, they tend to be away for cycles of centuries, returning only briefly to exchange those in their care that are not growing any longer, for those that may. As stated, this is done to allow the unsold as many solid chances with as many varied set of primaries as possible, all the better to find that set which will spawn a new soul's flame. The greater whole of Celestian society is based on what they're best known for: planetary scale terraforming. With their mighty Shaper class vessels, the largest non-expeditious class ship in the realms, they can reshape a barren world into a vibrant, lush place in months. More commonly, they are employed to lay the initial infrastructure for a colony site or two, basically prepping a world for future colonization efforts. As their vessels allow for them to work on a star system scale, they can rapidly prepare a new system for expansion and living by many peoples. In the future, perhaps a fuller dive into this particular process will be warranted, but for now it is enough to know that their works are most often not remarked upon or known by the common person. Only do the elites or the royal tend to have an understanding of the efforts of the Celestians, as these are the parties most often employing their services, as it is a fact that the Celestians seem to have no expansionist aims for their race. They made no planetary or system claims, despite having been granted 4 open system claims by the Council. Instead, they seem more than content to live on their massive shaper ships and just go about their work of being the best geomancers the realms have on offer. Thus do the Celestians provide a massive service to the greater realms, even if most never see it in actual effect beyond wandering nodes. And with this overview of the Celestian people wrapped up for now, and until your next visit to the library, by the 9 and 4, be well, take care of yourselves and each other.